and welcome to KoshienCast, the podcast where not all cycling anime are created equal. My name is Matt, and joining me today is a very special guest, Matt.
Hello.
Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I am excited by the fact that we are going to be discussing the clearly disparate quality in most cycling anime.
Yeah,
Apparently,
exactly. You'd think that they'd be able to just get it right, like Long Riders last season and eventually this season, and Minami Kamakura Girls High School Cycling Club this season. If you want to make a cycling show, just sort of copy Yowamushi. It's not
yeah,
that
I was about
hard.
to say it's like literally the format is right
I
there.
know.
Just, just take that and make it girls. That's
I
fine.
know.
You can do that.
I wish somebody would, and.
Well, considering the fact that we have Baku on from last season too,
I know.
something tells me we're not going to see the end of girls cycling.
Well, yeah, we're not going to see the end of girls cycling, but used as a means to not tell sports stories. But anyway, we're getting distracted. Today, March, we're going to be wrapping up week 3 of the winter anime season, where we will cover all sports anime that aired between January 15th and the 21st. Before we dive into Yawapeda, we did have one announcement, last week and last season when we were talking about Long Riders and then with the first episode of Minami Kamakura, we noticed a weird trend with the apparent relationship between cycling in Japan and the animal, the alpaca. And Matt, you said you were going to do some research, and you did dig up a few things on this important
Yes.
topic, didn't you?
Yes, I actually did figure out a couple things here. First of all, apparently the alpaca cycling store from Long Riders from last season and later this season, uh, that is actually a reference to a real cycling store that existed in Japan that by the same name, though it is closed down now.
Okay.
Not only that, but apparently there is a brand of cycling gear that's the brand name is Alpaca.
Okay.
And I think what these are is that that both of these series came up with the dumb joke of like having characters themed after alpaca, basically as a pun regarding this. Not only that, but the constant presence of alpaca. Alpacas are very hot in Japan right now. I don't know how else to put it.
Okay.
It's kind of become the sort of generic girly girl thing to like. It like alongside girls like sweets, they like flowers, they like cute things. Alpacas are part of that. And so there's a lot of you can find so much alpaca merch because apparently the alpaca references do not stop here. I discovered apparently there is very heavy alpaca themed merchandising and theming in like Love Live in like idol type shows like that. So
Wait.
so
What?
I guess
Really?
yeah, I have. I know people who are into Love Live. My sister's into Love Live, and I have a friend who's really into Love Live. And yeah, they were telling me, yeah, there's absolutely alpaca themed things in that as well. So again, I think these shows are trying to be like, oh, these girls aren't they silly? They like alpacas.
Well, actually, that brings to mind. I don't know. Did you ever watch Polar Bears Cafe?
No, I meant to.
It's a great one. One of the better. Anime comedy is a hard thing to pull off, and it does it better than most. But there's an ongoing joke that one of the main characters in it is a llama, and he,
Right.
and a lot of the main characters work at a zoo as animals in a zoo, like
Right.
that's their job, and the llama is constantly discouraged by how the alpaca is so much more popular than him, and all the girls want to like get pictures with the alpaca. And no one wants to see the llama, and he's like, "We're cousins. What's so good about him?" So anyway, so that is interesting that alpacas are on trend right now.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so we do have several shows to go through. This is going to be, I'm kind of excited to be back on a normal schedule. We've got
Right.
one episode of everything back to normal for the rest of the season. So
Just
we'll
normal length discussions. No need to rush through
yeah,
anything. We're
exactly.
not.
So we're just going to dive right into Yowapeda. Episode
Of course.
2.
Yes, episode 2. Okay, so this episode is largely about Teshima coming into his own as the manager of the club. Onoda's having some problems uh, getting back into the swing of things, especially with the depressing leaving of Makishima. Teshima manages to encourage him and is like, "Hey, it's okay if you need to take basically like it's okay. You just go at your own pace." We also find out more about Hokone's team and all of the members who are leaving there, and then the who's replacing all the old guard essentially.
Right.
And we find out that from Izumida is going to be the new captain, who was, if anybody remembers, he was the guy who had his obsession with abs.
Yeah.
And then there are two other characters who I don't remember if one of them was introduced one last season, and then the new guy, he is a former teammate of Teshima from back when they were in junior high, and then the episode ends with them beginning a race up Minagana Hill. This is actually like an official race, and this is kind of supposed to be Onoda's like kind of getting back into the swing of things.
Right. Yeah, so as you referred to, the two new members on Hakone is Kuroda. He was briefly in the second season of
Right,
Yamapeda, because they were showing how he like barely lost out to get a slot on the Inter High roster.
right.
Um, and,
Yeah, because he lost to Anoda's big rival from that match, whose name is escaping me. Minami.
right. Yeah, which is confusing because, of course, we have another show called Minami. But yeah,
Yeah.
he lost to Minami, and then the other character Ashikiba is sort of set up as the new big bad, I guess, for Sahoku to see in this next
Kind
race.
of.
So anyway,
Right. Well, because
go ahead.
oh yeah, basically this race. I think Ashikiba. He was. Was he the only one from Hakone who was in the race there? Because he's there kind of the spy on Onoda. Because Hakone, one of their big things that they talked about this episode, or that the former captain discussed, was like, yeah, we did everything right. We should have won that. The only reason we lost is because Onoda was such a wild card
Mm-hmm.
that there was no way we could have predicted him.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they'll end up with him. They were the only. Ashikiba was the only Hakone member they showed there, but like,
Okay.
so I mean, as far as I understand, the Minagiyama race, it's like a climb race, so it's a hill race. So that's why
Right.
the only people from Sahoku that went was Inoda and Teshima because they're both climbers, and Imaizumi went because he's an all-rounder. So I think he mostly just went to support Onoda. Um,
Right.
so I'm not sure if Akone sent Kuroda as well, since he's also supposed to be a climber.
Right.
But I guess we'll find out next week. But we're sort of digging into the end of the episode. But overall, what did you think about the theming?
I I thought this was a pretty solid episode. This is gonna maybe be a little controversial. Teshima is such a more interesting character than the former captain, Kinjo,
Yeah.
because Kinjo was kind of like he was almost boringly stoic.
Well, yeah, he was perfect. You know.
Yeah, he was basically the perfect writer, and literally the only reason why he wasn't the one who finished out the race for them last season wasn't he having an issue with his bike, or
No,
was
he
there
got
an
injured.
oh, he did get injured. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, it's been a little bit since I've seen the original Yawapeda, so but yeah, and it's like, but he was so boringly perfect. Like, he, like, everything he did was just in the mind. He had his own, like, sort of perfect logic for how he was going to settle things. He was so idealistic
Well, yeah, and
and,
he
like,
didn't really have much development. You know, he
right.
was just sort of um, the way he came across was more it's similar to the way that a lot of coach characters come across in these shows
Right.
where he has this almost unbelievably deep voice, especially for a
High
17
school.
17 year old.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's unbelievably mature and confident and smooth and like stoic. And he just talks like this all the
Yeah,
time,
and
and he's very
he knows how to do everything, and you do not question his logic because he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I agree
I,
that Teshima's a more interesting captain because he's clearly had to work for it. And
right.
I like the fact that he didn't even make it onto the team his first 2 years, so he wasn't like he's going to be going into his senior year competing for the first time in the inner high. So it
Right.
clearly it didn't come easy for him. Um, and there's a sequence that's between Makishima as he's heading out to England talking to Todo from Hakone, and
Right.
he's describing Teshima, surprisingly. He's saying, like, yeah, I mean, we have Onada, he's a good climber, but we also have Teshima, who's an idiot, but he's a hard worker. And so I kind of liked the logic that, like, Teshima is not supposed to be a naturally good cyclist. Like,
Right.
he's not actually that good at racing, but what he does have is, dedication, which, of course, in these shows is all important. Um,
Right.
and,
But a lot of times with the characters who are just purely dedicated but aren't very good, they're always kind of regulated to a side role. Like, they kind of have their big moment where they finally get to enter the game, where their dedication and hard work pays off.
yeah.
But they get their kind of one big moment. Like Yamaguchi is the classic example, or at least the modern classic example from Haikyuu, because he's finally perfected the jump or the no spin serve,
Yeah.
basically the float serve.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's like his one thing that he can do.
Yeah.
But he's not very good otherwise. But he's not really like that big of a member. He has his place. So it's really interesting to actually see a character like that in such a leading and important role for the
No, I
series.
agree. I also
And I
thought it
oh, go
was
ahead.
yeah, I thought it was interesting that when basically it was discovered that Teshima didn't have much in the way of natural instincts, they decided to make him a climber because they said, like, being a climber, that's the only one that requires no strategy because there's no trick to climbing. You
Right.
just have to, like, be strong and have stamina and do this really hard thing because you can't play off other people. You can't have other people block the wind for you. You can't strategize when you're gonna sprint. You just have to, like, climb as hard as you can. That's the
Right.
only way to be a climber.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like it's kind of suited for him in that regard, especially because I did like that sequence where he was constantly timing himself. He was trying to catch up to Makishima. He could make it up that climb in about 6 minutes. He was only at 8 minutes, and there's nothing really that he's it's really discouraging. The fact that he's still so far behind Makishima, but he's not really like distraught over
Yeah,
it.
no.
Well, it's just kind of like he's like, cool, I made it to 8 minutes now. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, Makishima's at 6. Like, that's still like a Herculean task I'm gonna have to take here, but I'm making progress.
Yeah. I agree. Was there anything else that really stood out from this one?
The other thing I really liked was the little speech that Teshima gave Onoda,
Hmm.
which was I liked that. You again, a lot of these series, they tend to value hard work over everything. Hard work in like lieu of anything, and the
Yeah.
fact that Onoda is getting really stressed out about the fact that it's like, look, we're gonna have to be champions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
really like that whole thing where Teshima at first, Teshima is like, we are counting on you to kind of work as the climber. You're going to be really valuable. The more pressure Onoda's getting here, the worse he's doing. And then Teshima pulls back, and you think this is going to be kind of the big scolding or the get it together scene. And Teshima's like, I get it, man. You don't know where you are right now. You gotta it's okay to just take it easy for right now. No big deal. We got time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because that's true. Like, they have a long time before the inner high, so it's like, it's better if you need to rest now. You should do that. Don't force yourself to work.
Yeah, don't beat yourself over the fact it's like you don't know where your standing is, and that's fine. That's like, hey, that's what I've had to do for like the past year or so.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no big deal, man. Just take it easy for
Yeah,
now.
just figure out what you're comfortable with, and then you'll know what to do when the time comes. So, like, I did like that. I thought it was the kind of speech that I don't think Kinjo could have given in earnest.
Yeah.
So I liked it. Overall, I thought the second episode had a little more meat to it than the first one. Um, and I'll admit I'm really excited to actually see a race.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's been a while, it'll be interesting to see how Yowamushi Pedal does it, because again, it's been a while since we've seen the original series, and I'm not really back into the swing of things yet,
Yeah.
so I need to see how they handle races again and see kind of how it compares to my memories.
No, I agree. But one thing we are not unfamiliar with is March comes in like a lion. Um, so we saw this week was episode 15. Um, at the end of the last episode, Ray was in the middle of his match against Shimada, and he realized that he'd sort of stepped into a trap, and he was actually in a disadvantageous position. And this episode picks up right there. Ray is sort of struck, and for a while he's unable to respond when he realizes what a bad position he's in.
Right.
Um, but eventually he gets himself together and he responds, but he's not able to make up the difference, and he ends up losing the match. He sort of tries to figure out what he did wrong and realized he was completely outplayed. He ends up sort of really frustrated with himself, and he runs home. Um, and then after the match, Shimada separately, he talks to Mr. Smith for a while about the match, and he also talks to Nakaido. And they discuss whether or not Ray should join their training academy or their workshop together.
Right.
Then in the second half, Ray uh, he sort of falls apart a little bit. He's exhausted. Eventually, he decides he needs to go back to school because, if nothing else, he needs to graduate high school. But he's really depressed. He's not able to focus anything. He's able eventually to talk with his teacher and sort of talk through some of his issues, but he's really not making much progress, and he's really not sure what his goal should be now. And then the episode ends with Shimada talking to Nakaido again in person, saying that even though they both want Ray to join their workshop, they have to wait for him to want it. They can't make him do it.
Right. Real quick, before we launch into discussion of this episode, I just want to clear this up. You said this was episode 15. Wasn't this episode 14?
Was it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Well, I believe you. That's
Okay, I just don't want to confuse listeners here.
sure.
Uh, okay, so anyway. Um,
Oh yeah, you're right. Episode 14. I'm sorry.
you're fine, dude. Um, okay, so I thought this was an interesting episode. I wasn't. There's not really like a whole. Well, I shouldn't say there isn't a whole lot of development. There is a lot of development for Ray. Um, I liked a lot of what they did with Ray. Like, I think my favorite moment during this episode is just this very intense, like, this whole, like, mental image Ray has in his head of how he's drowning, like, how he can't even bear to be there anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but he's just sort of stuck suffocating. And just, like, with that really intense music and all of, like, it's almost, like, unbearable to watch. And then it's totally interrupted with just, like, this very quiet cough. Like the series actively cuts away from that scene, just like back into reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the way that sequence, like that, just that edit there, uh, how much it captures like the in the moment feeling, like this sort of dichotomy between like how like people can basically interpret different like events in their life. Like for example, like for Ray, this is a very intense moment. He's kind of getting wrapped up in it. But then you have this just that quick cough to remind you, okay, this is reality. This is what's actually happening.
Yeah, in reality, Shimada's just sort of like, okay, move it along.
Yeah, come on.
Let's not waste time here. So he just
Right.
clears his throat and tells him it's okay, get yourself together, keep playing. Which is a totally different perspective from what we see from Ray. From Ray's
Yeah.
perspective, all of his goals are falling apart, and from Shimada, he's like, all right, let's wrap this
All
up.
right. Come on. Come on. It's game time.
Yeah.
Come on. I know you're losing, but we gotta get through this, man.
Yeah.
But this was something we were talking about a little bit before. Why don't you talk a little bit about Shimada himself?
Well, yeah. So one of the highlights we pointed out last week in episode 13 was we both thought it was great how until Ray sort of walked into this trap, he didn't actually look at Shimada's face, and we as the viewers didn't see Shimada's face either. Um,
Right.
and so I liked that effect where he's such a simple and sort of possibly boring character that he doesn't show up until he does something dramatic. Um, and yeah, it was the same way here where I liked. You don't expect him to be anything but a stepping stone to Goto, because the series
Right.
sets up through Ray's own, internal narrative that the real goal is Ray having his showdown with Goto. Um, but Shimada is also a person, and he has his own goals, and
Right.
he does not plan to have someone who's less experienced than him just step over him like it's nothing. um, and so you get to see this sort of shift where once Ray's goal falls apart and he gets destroyed, you see him talk with Mr. Smith for a while about his own goals, um, and how Shimada, he came into this match and his focus is on getting to play Soya. So like he also has another goal outside. He was focused on Ray and he was a little more experienced, so he didn't underestimate Ray. But his ultimate goal was to have a rematch with Soya because they had started playing together and then Soya sort of outpaced him and he wants to catch up again. Uh,
Right.
and so I liked the parallel where everyone here has their own goals. Everyone here has their
Right.
own mission at stake. And Shimada's is just as important to him as Ray's.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was interesting too. He like Shimada's a really like he's not he's kind of a deceptively interesting character because he also has a very he feels like he seems like he has a very pragmatic view on life. He's not necessarily like annoyed with Ray because he mentions like during his discussion with Mr. Smith like hey, so like let me guess, he was a kid, right? He's as a kid, he saw how Goto had like 20 games and I only have like fine, and so he kind of just focused on that, right?
Yeah.
And Mr. Smith kind of freezes up and he just kind of has this sort of like, "Oh my god, are you serious?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like that's actually what he did, like this sort of like almost sort of this disbelief like I mean, I guess that was the case. It's just weird to actually have that confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's something that's very he seems very comfortable with himself in a way that it almost feels like a lot of other characters aren't.
Yeah, I mean, Shimada knows where he stands. Like, he knows that he's not. He knows he's good, but he also knows that he's not elite. And he knows that he doesn't have
Right.
much of a reputation. And he knows that, like, he's not someone that has a big name in the shogi world. Um, and he's not, like, super uncomfortable with it. But there's also. At the same time, you'd expect a character like this to be sort of cold and calculating,
Right.
but no, that's just sort of the way he talks. It's clear that he's like during the match he's trying to protect Ray and trying to like help him collect himself and trying to
Right.
help him learn. And then after the match it's clear that like, he was so devastating in part because he wanted Ray to come train with him and Ray to come learn, with him and Nikaido and stop training
Right.
by himself. So like his goals are always to like help build Ray up, and he's actually very thoughtful about what Ray needs as a person. But that it doesn't come across by his demeanor.
Right. Kind of going along with what you're saying here, I kind of want to touch on one other thing regarding that.
Okay.
With Nikaido, I feel like we didn't get full confirmation about what he meant by wanting to split Ray's head
Yeah.
open. I think I understand a little bit better now
Okay.
because I don't think it was really meant to be a malicious thing. I think Nikaido understood that Ray was very he's very set in his ways, and if he keeps going as he is, like if he doesn't experience this overwhelming loss, then he's never going to be able to grow
Mm-hmm.
as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Because Ray even acknowledges like, look, I didn't even see Shimada as anybody more than just another player. Like I got so wrapped up in this stupid little feud I have with Goto that I wasn't even really considering, like, I was seeing this almost as this grand stand against him that I forgot I'm playing in a competition right now. Like, this isn't really about a petty, like, rivalry or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't about, like, some sort of personal feud I have with Goto. And I think Nikaido realizes that. Maybe not, like, the extent of which, the fact... I doubt he even knows about his whole situation, the whole situation between Goto and Rei. But I think Nikaido sees Rei's stubbornness being kind of a detriment to his character, and that he needed somebody to bring him down.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
Especially because I love the fact we had discussed this before we started recording about how uh, like Shimada had Rei cornered right from the beginning of the match almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like because they have this whole sequence where they're going through each of their moves, and Shimada was just like, yeah, I would have just done this, bam, you were done anyway. Like, as soon as I moved this rook here, you were done.
Yeah. And what it did well, because after the match, Rei wants to find a way that, like, oh, he just made one stupid mistake. He very well could have won if he hadn't made one stupid mistake. But what he realizes is when he goes back and talks through the match with Shimada that no, it wasn't one stupid mistake. It was Shimada trapped him completely, and he was outmaneuvered. And he didn't just happen to lose because of an error. He got dominated. Um,
Right. This was a fundamental issue with his playstyle.
Right. Yeah, like there was no possible way for his playstyle to beat Shimada.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great. I thought it was really interesting. What the last thing I want to talk about with this is what did you think of sort of his breakdown and him going back to high school?
There was one thing I thought that was really interesting, and I think it's a very relatable subject for, I think, not only for high school students, but I think also for anybody in college and even college graduates. I mean, myself included. Is this notion? Rei mentions that the reason he wanted to move out, the reason why he wanted to become a professional shogi player was because, he wanted to feel like an adult. He wanted to be an adult, and he thought being an adult meant he could move, he could sustain himself, he could support himself,
Mm-hmm.
and like, he could pay his own rent, he didn't have to live by anybody else's rules. And again, he has more of a reason for that than just, yeah, screw my parents, I don't want to live under their reign
Yeah.
anymore. But, he has this kind of notion that, that's what being an adult is all
Right.
about. And rooted in that is that whole thing. It's like, well, if I'm an adult, then I never have to cry again.
Yeah.
But I thought that discussion was incredibly relatable, like pretty much to anybody, because I think that's a stage that everybody goes through at their life at some point, regardless of, like, Ray's experiencing it a little bit earlier than I think a lot of other people do, but I think that's a very like a relatable mindset. Like this whole, like, I just because I moved out of my parents' house, just because I'm like supporting myself, that doesn't actually make me an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, he has this discussion with his teacher, just like, who even mentions, like, Ray, you may not be suited for school, like for high school. That's okay. Like, you may need to go back and move with your parent, with your guardian, with your legal guardian, because you have too much on your plate right now.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, I guess it was kind of a almost a physician heal thyself moment.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was good too. I thought it's sort of funny to see the juxtaposition of Ray being, dealing with these adults in this sort of high stakes professional shogi world, and then, he just sleeps it off. He's exhausted, he's depressed. Eventually he decides, like, well, I did say I'm still in high school. I might as well go to school. I don't have anything else to do. He shows up at school and it's like nobody even knows who he is, but he doesn't really belong. He ends up in PE and he doesn't know how to play basketball. He's totally disoriented. And
Right.
it's like, yeah, like everyone else is having these high school experiences and like growing and developing together, and you're just off by yourself. And so I think he's like
Right.
forced to notice that he's not actually moving forward. Like he thought that all this shogi stuff would help him move forward, but he's not.
Yeah. Um, Real quick, I just want to bring up as well. I think what this is all building up towards is I think he's going to end up moving in with the sisters. I think that's honestly what they're building towards because he won't go back to live with his guardian.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to realize after all of this that he's going to end up, he needs to live with somebody, so he's going to end up actually just. I think that's where the series is going to end.
I hope so, because, like, it's just so clear that he's mentally and emotionally so much better off when he's with his, that family.
With his quote unquote
Yeah,
sisters.
exactly. No, I agree.
Just before we wrap up, there's just a weird little thing I want to point out. I kind of am amused by the fact that because we've never really discussed this too much, but every half of an episode is referred to by chapter.
Yeah.
And the first half of this episode, that was chapter. It was called Blinding Darkness, and I thought it was really funny that it ended with Mr. Smith talking baby talk to his new kitten.
Oh, yeah, that was a
Yeah, it
little.
was just really funny seeing that, hearing all this, like, oh, who's the cutest little thing, making kissy faces at his little kitten, and having that title card, Blinding Darkness,
Yeah.
like, pop up, like, Blinding Darkness End.
Yeah, that was a little disorienting. Speaking of disorienting, how about this segue? You want to talk about All Out?
Yeah, sure, let's do it. Okay, so that's on me. This one was dealing with Issei, who I always refer to in my head as Hornhair.
Yep.
And this entire episode was really about his conflict with his brother. He basically survives off his brother, because both of their parents are dead. So Issei's brother supports the two of them, and Issei can't really make it to the training camp because it costs money, and his brother doesn't have the money to give him, to do that. He's slightly abusive to Issei as well,
Mm-hmm.
but Issei has a talk with Ibumi, who effectively tells him, like, hey, I'll pay you for your training camp. It's fine. I've got the money for it. And we learn that Ibumi has his own issues with his mother basically not being present, and she was just giving him money for food every day, and he was just saving it up.
Right.
And it ends with Issei. It actually kind of has a non-resolution because we don't really get to see that moment where Issei is like, hey bro, I'm going to the training camp whether or not you want me to.
Yeah.
But it kind of ends with him just sort of going into his apartment with his brother at the very end. And we're kind of like, I guess we're supposed to assume that that Issei's just going to go ahead and go to the training camp now because he has the money for that.
Well, he has the money for it, but you also had the scene right before that with his older brother who was, looking through the fact that Issei had thrown away all his rugby gear, and he was sort of
Right.
feeling bad about that and thinking back to the time where he begged to adopt his brother, so that they could stay together. And,
Right.
clearly somewhere along the line their relationship soured, and he became kind of, like you said, emotionally abusive towards Issei. But he sort of remembers how things started.
Okay.
But no, I think it was pretty clear that they had made up, and also because at the end, his brother asks, who's that guy talking to Ibumi, and he says is like, he may look rough, but he's my teammate. And even though he'd insisted he was quitting the team, clearly he's not.
Real quick about that scene, I actually made a quick note about that. I thought that was kind of funny. Was that the translation says who was that thug?
Yeah.
But if you listen to him, to the brother, he clearly says who's that Yankee.
That's funny.
Yeah, I kind of think I believe that's meant to be slang about how Americans are violent. I thought that was just kind of funny.
I don't know if it's that he's violent. Is that like because Ibumi dyes his hair blonde?
Well, there's that too.
So like he's trying to put on an American look or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, overall I wasn't sure totally what to think of the episode. I mentioned to you at the time that it had a little bit of an after school special vibe to it.
Yeah, and I can see where you're coming from there with like the whole like, oh, two brothers, their parents are died, and the older brother, he's just trying to take care of his younger brother, do what's best for him, but they don't get along, and
Mm-hmm.
now they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of, and especially you kind of have that ham-fisted like no, like that flashback where he's like, no, I have to take care of my brother. He's so young,
Yeah.
and I can't just send him off to be with some family he doesn't know. I'll take care of him myself.
Yeah.
And, remembers how their relationship used to be so strong, and now it's not.
Yeah. So
Uh,
that aside, what did you like about it?
okay, what I like about it is that I appreciate the fact that we have a sports series at the very least that is making clear what this team means for each of the different
Yeah.
players. Because again, a lot of sports series have this sort of thing. There's this sort of this assumed camaraderie between all the different members, and we've kind of learned like through each of these different like vignettes, like all of these different characters and each of their different stories, that the rugby team means something different to everybody beyond just I want to play football or rugby. Sorry, I was letting some Ice Shield 21 sink in there with my friends. It's like we just want to we want to all be the best together, and we all want to win together. And it's just like for Issei, this is a place where he gets to hang out with his friends. Like he wants to still be a part of that, and he doesn't really have much else of another life. It's kind of the same thing with Abumi to an extent. Like he loves to play the sport, but he likes. He wants to be with his teammates because, frankly, he doesn't have much of a home life himself.
Yeah, no, and I thought it was interesting. I don't know if it had been revealed or alluded to earlier, the fact that Issei and Abumi were both, when they started high school, they were both kind of delinquents.
Right.
But despite that, Hachi recruited both of them and said that they would have fun playing rugby. So like, he was someone who didn't mind the fact that they were kind of uh, they cut a certain impression that they were trying to intimidate people. Hachi wasn't intimidated, and he still wanted to play rugby with them. So like, it was a place where they were valued for who they were, and that was the only place they had that feeling. So yeah, no, I really I enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing another side of Abumi where, yeah, like he's kind of a crazy person, and he's a little bit of a jerk sometimes, and he's kind of like has an uncontrollable temper, but he also like really cares about his friend, and is furious at the idea that Issei would quit, because he's like, do you remember like where we came from? Like, we were not in a good place, and the rugby team
Right.
helped us, and we owe it to ourselves to see this thing through. um,
I think it's also kind of interesting as well that this is a series that's kind of addressing sort of an undercurrent that tends to get ignored in a lot of sports series, which is kind of the lower aspect versus like the lower class versus higher class aspect. Like because a lot of the best teams tend to come like it's always very subtle in a lot of these where it's like a lot of like the best teams are very wealthy and well off,
uh-huh.
and you have kind of like the sort of everyman team that's able to rise up against them, and it's like it's kind of interesting to see a sports series that's sort of like head on addressing that.
Hmm. Well, yeah.
Like they're actually like, yeah, these are all people who come from very tattered and like decidedly low class families.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case economically, because it doesn't appear that Ibumi has a disadvantaged economic background.
Right.
It's just that like he's coming from a place that is emotionally difficult, like where his parents aren't physically around to
Present.
support him. So for whatever reason, they're not coming. Like, a lot of these characters are not coming from healthy homes, whether that's
Right.
economically or emotionally. Um, but I agree, like, there was a scene where Abumi was talking to Issei, and he's like, dude, let's just be real. Neither of us are going to college. You know,
Yeah,
we
yeah, I loved that
we
line.
like, if we're gonna have fun, we have like if we're gonna have fun, if we're gonna play rugby, we have to do it now, and we have to give it everything we got, because after this, we
Like
don't
we
get,
don't have
yeah, we don't have that to look forward to. Like, we're gonna, we're both gonna be working after we graduate.
yeah, it's like we're not gonna have our idyllic college days. We're probably gonna end up working probably construction jobs.
Well, I don't know about
Uh,
that, but like, whatever they're gonna do, this is
right.
their chance.
Sorry, I don't mean to disparage construction jobs. I just mean in the sense of like the type of higher paying work that would suit their own talents effectively.
Right.
Um, and there's a recurring theme in here that I kind of like, and I'm sorry to bring this up, and I know you're sick of hearing me talk about it, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of One Piece.
Okay.
Uh, just in the sense of that these are all. One of the things I really like about One Piece, for example, is the fact that all of the main crew, separately, they're all very broken, tattered people, but as a group, they're kind of like a family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the same sense I'm getting with All Out a little bit, that these are, like, everybody on this team has their own problems. Like, these are all people who have been kind of beaten down almost, but the team kind of gives them some form of purpose.
Yeah, you keep seeing that with these characters, whether it was Keita last episode or Issei this episode, where when they're separated from the team, they just think about how much fun they had together. And you're like, did you really have fun together? Most of the scenes you have are just like working out and being exhausted and having a tough time, but like they have that camaraderie that they don't have anywhere else in their life. And so
Right.
you see it's definitely filling a hole for a lot of these people.
It means a lot more to me in this series than it does in something like Haikyuu, which I still always love Haikyuu. Will always adore that series. But it's like they have this camaraderie, but it's like, yeah, they're all just kind of playing on the same team. They all love playing together. There's not really, but it's like, when they go home, do they really have like a miserable life?
Well, it's
Probably
not
not.
you have no real reason to believe in Haikyuu that the volleyball team is helping them find something they can't find in their own home. And that's what
Right.
you're getting in All Out, is like these are people who need the rugby team, not because they need to win or they need to be the best, but because they need a home and they
Yeah.
need a family that their own family can't provide. So yeah, so as sort of Hallmark channel-y as that can feel sometimes, I think overall I'm glad that a show like this exists.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm just going to throw this out here right now. This is the show that I kind of wish Cheer Boys had been
Yeah,
in that
in
regard.
what way?
Well, just in the sense that, because Cheer Boys was kind of trying to do something like that, where, you have all of these different
Oh
people who
yeah.
kind of come into the club and they find their own meaning in, what cheering is, but, you don't know most of these people. You don't really get to see any of their lives.
Mhm.
Like, you don't really even understand why certain characters feel the way they feel. But we get that in All
Yeah,
Out.
I agree. It's really well done. The pacing is good, and I'm consistently surprised by how much I enjoy it. Honestly.
Yeah, right.
So moving on to a show that I am not surprised by how much I enjoy, or don't enjoy, as the case may be, is
Right.
Tiger Mask. So we've got Tiger Mask
Please.
episode 15.
Correct.
Thank you. Yes, I did label the episode correctly this time. Thanks.
No
Um,
problem, buddy.
and so this follows up where last episode Tiger Mask was invited to a match in the Max Dome, the new GWM
Yep.
arena in Tokyo, and he finds out that his opponent is Mr. Bigfoot, who is an American wrestler who is like 9 feet tall and 530 pounds. And so he's effectively just a giant. So then separately, you find that there's before the Tiger Mask match, there's gonna be a women's double match between. So we had Pain and Queen, who were these two GWM wrestlers that were introduced in episode 13, and they're gonna fight a Japanese pair of female wrestlers called, wait for it, Candy Pair, because they're sweet and there's two of them. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so they eventually have the match. Candy Pair gets dominated. Like it's actually animated pretty pretty well for Tiger Mask. And you get to see Candy Pair get physically crushed by the GWM wrestlers. And then they got to Tiger Mask and Bigfoot. Sorry, Mr. Bigfoot. He does have a
Thank
proper
you.
name.
Use his
Um,
full name.
yeah, exactly. And Tiger Mask almost gets trapped. Bigfoot rolls over on him, but he's able to break out. Eventually, Tiger Mask is motivated by seeing Rory in the audience, And when Mr. Bigfoot charges at him, he throws him into a pole and wins.
Sorry. I'm just really amused by the fact that that's like there's no other way he could have beaten him.
Yeah. Yeah, so do you want to talk about why Mr. Bigfoot is great?
Okay, so Mr. Bigfoot is introduced to us so they're having their big interview scene with Mr. Bigfoot, and he walks up to a tree, a fully grown tree, and bear hugs it and completely and utterly destroys
Yeah, he
it.
just breaks a tree in half with his arms.
And then when asked if he has any messages, his response is that he's very hungry. He wants a very tender steak.
Yeah.
And then Miss X, of course, has to tell him, "No, you idiot! I mean for Tiger Mask."
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
One thing that we joked about after we'd seen the episode was that Mr. Bigfoot is a masked wrestler, and he wears sort of this like tribal mask with these like dreadlocks coming out the back. And yet he's 9 feet tall and over 500 pounds, so like can he really hide his identity? He's got like how many
right, like I
people
mean,
have his proportions?
yeah, seriously, like how does his mask actually conceal any form of identity? Like literally, you see him walk down the street, you're gonna be like, "Hey, there's Mr.
Yeah,
Bigfoot."
exactly.
Especially because he doesn't even do anything to hide his hair.
Yeah.
Like that would be the one thing you could do.
Yeah.
Possibly, but no, he just wears like a face mask.
Yeah. It was
Um,
it was something special.
like Mr. Bigfoot is really more the type of character I would have expected to see more in like the first third of the series that we never got. These sort of weirds, like over the top, goofy type of
Yeah.
fighters.
Like all the GWM wrestlers were presented as evil.
Right.
But now we get Mr. Bigfoot. He's just goofy,
Right.
He,
He was kind of more the level of camp I was expecting from Tiger Mask. Kind of stupid, but not like. Still kind of fun to watch, not just sort of groan inducing.
yeah, exactly. Like
Uh,
our introduction with the GWM wrestling team was, Red Death Mask, who wants to make your face bleed and then kill you. Like, it
right.
wasn't goofy like, I'm big and I like eating steak. This is more my speed.
Right. There was one line I really loved from Tiger Mask, which was like his whole strategy was like, okay, so he beats his opponents in 5 minutes. He has no stamina. No, he beats his opponent. All that says is that he beats his opponents in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know. I mean, clearly he's just operating on the assumption that, if he's that big and that strong, there's no way he can keep up with me.
Right.
But then he
Yeah, but
just
I mean,
does.
I do understand that, and really that's the way you have to approach a giant fighter like that. But at the same time, it's like you can't count on that.
So what do you think
Uh,
of Tiger Mask / Naoto's heavy emphasis on the Ruri pairing now?
yeah, yeah, I kind of thought it was funny that like out of all the characters who were there watching him, it's like the fact that Rory was watching him. It's like no, that's the one. Like that's the reason. Like that's the reason he needs to fight
Yeah,
to
exactly.
keep going. And it's kind of a weird tradition I'm noticing spring up in a lot of anime with like character. You have to have your big inspiring moment where the character has to think back on like all the people they're trying to protect and who they're fighting for, and then the last one always has to be their romantic
Mm-hmm.
interest. And sometimes it can work, other times it can really ring hollow. Like actually, one of the more recent Dragon Ball Z movies does this with when Goku's trying to fight off Beerus, the Egyptian cat god type character, and he thinks that, like his final one is thinking of Chi Chi, and it's like, really, man, you care that much about Chi Chi?
Yeah. Well,
But
he
that's
ought
beside the
to,
point.
but like he certainly never showed it in the show.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that was kind of the same feeling I got from Naoto thinking of Rory, like in that moment of like, no, Rory's watching me, like I have to keep fighting for her, and it's like you guys kind of just established this romantic tension
Yeah,
between
exactly.
the
Like
two.
you've talked 5 times and gone on one pseudo not actually date.
Yeah, and that's where that was actually something I had thought about last episode as being a weakness of the series that still kind of applies here. We don't really know Naoto.
Oh no, I mean we got a little bit of his background, but you don't know him. No.
Yeah, like you don't know him at all. Like you kind of know Tiger Mask as like a figure, but you don't really know Naoto all that well. You don't really know what drives him beyond just wanting to beat up Yellow Devil because because he broke his mentor essentially.
Yeah.
Like, but there's not really anything else to Naoto but that motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of why this whole thing with this whole pairing with Rory falls apart, because you don't really know what Rory means to him beyond just she's a girl who may kind of like me.
Yeah, exactly. Was there anything else that stuck out about this one?
I am actually going to disagree with you with your statement on the candy pair
Okay.
thing. So there was something that I noticed that was really distracting. Was that when one of this pair, her name was Milk, when she's getting beat up, I believe by Pain,
Yeah.
and they're showing her constantly getting kneed in the gut by Pain. They keep reusing the same animation, and normally I wouldn't care, whatever, they're on a budget, whatever. Uh, but they keep doing this thing where every time she gets kneed in the stomach, they do a very quick like half-second cut to the shot of like the close-up shot of the knee actually hitting her in the gut. And maybe it's just me. I noticed this immediately, and it was super jarring because it's literally like you keep getting like this elongated shot of like the knee to the gut, and just like, but it only lasts for like a second. It's almost like a jump, like it's almost like subliminal when you see it.
Yeah. I was mostly thinking
Uh,
of I liked the Pain lariat when she first knocks
oh,
down Milk. Like I thought that was a really effective shot. Um,
that's fair,
and
and you know
I
what? I'll agree
liked
with
and
that.
I enjoyed the suplex that Queen did to like intercept the other Candy Pair team member.
That's
I
fair,
thought those were cool. Like, yeah, overall, it's nothing to write home about, but I thought there were some
right?
cool shots in there. Considering it
I
was a
thought it was
secondary.
interesting that
Yeah, sorry.
I thought it was slightly interesting that apparently this is sort of inspiring Haruna to maybe wanting to get into being a diva.
Yeah, that wasn't clear.
Yeah, that wasn't clear. It's actually really funny. Maybe not like that funny, but I thought it was kind of amusing that Haruna starts trying to do weight training on her own, like she's trying to do like bench pressing, and it's like, guys, this is a show directed towards kids. Don't encourage them to do bench presses by themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's dangerous. That's
That is incredibly dangerous. You can crush your head if you're not careful.
yeah.
You can get caught. You can suffocate.
Well, yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's just sort of a stereotypical like this is what exercise looks like image. But
Yeah, I know they didn't mean anything. And I mean, really, what kid in Japan is going to have, like, access to, like, a giant weight set like
I
that?
mean, I'm
But,
sure plenty do. But who knows? Um,
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
uh, so speaking of things we don't know, there's a lot we don't know about why Minami Kamakura High School Girls Cycling Club is the best show of the season. Why don't you tell us, Matt?
uh, I don't know if I would say the best show,
It's a
but
show.
it is a show that is airing currently
Okay.
every Saturday night.
Yeah.
Okay, so this episode has Tomoe and Hiromi. They're doing a tryout of all the different clubs. They first try out the basketball club, which they don't like, and then they go on to try the soft swimming club, which is basically just a kind of a swimming appreciation. Girls who want to play around in water, whatever.
Yeah.
And Hiromi almost drowns. Apparently, we'll talk about that later, and is saved by Higa, who is the short-haired girl from the previous episode, the girl who with the flat tire,
Yeah.
who's apparently part of this club. They go to the nurse's office, to kind of get Hiromi looked at. There, they also run into Fuyune, and they all decide to go to Fuyune's meeting that she's having with a mystery person for reasons.
Yeah.
And we find out they go with her. They go with her up to this hillside cottage, basically. It's on like the top of a hill, and they find out that her grandmother is staying there, and she just is going there to visit her. They discover that the grandmother was apparently part of a cycling club back in the day, And so right then and there, Fuyune decides, hey, I want to start up the cycling club again, and you all girls will join. And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens.
What happened in the AOP short?
Oh, they explain to us what a helmet is and what type of helmet you should choose. Spoiler alert, it is one that fits your head.
I love this show. Oh my gosh. It's so dumb. Oh man. Okay.
I almost love how unabashedly, like, you know, if I were a girl, I think I would be really offended by this show. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Because of just how naturally ditzy all of the girls are. One line that just got me so hard was in the discussion with Fuyune's grandmother. Is Hiromi is like, wow, 40 years, bicycles have been around that long?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how do you not know
Yeah.
that?
I mean, this is the girl who didn't know that bicycles were operated by pedals.
Right.
So she clearly just has some kind of brain disease. Um, yeah, so there's a lot to dig into with this one, and we can kind of jump around a little because Lord knows the plot doesn't matter in this show.
Yeah, God no.
So I just want to sort of address the concept of the episode. So as I understand it, they like all the girls in the school uh, effectively got a day off to wander around the school and explore all the different clubs because at Minami Kamakura you are required to join a club. That's just, a requirement
Right.
of being a student. Okay, fine.
Which, yeah, I don't think that's actually terribly uncommon in Japanese high schools because you are kind of expected to join clubs. You know, they have a shorter school day, so you can actually have time to, partake in other activities.
Sure, but it's not necessarily required at all schools. At this school it is. So
Right.
so they give
Yeah, and
they
that's fine.
yeah, so
Whatever.
they give them a day where they're allowed to meet with all the different clubs and decide which one or ones they want to join. Um, but what I liked was that Hiromi and Tomoe decide to go through and explore these clubs together, and they start with the basketball team. Like,
Right.
you don't need to eliminate every club. If you've never played basketball, you don't need to try
Right.
out for
Don't.
the basketball team.
There are plenty of other clubs, girls.
Yeah.
Like, go try them out. And like, I love that their reasoning is, oh, we should just try all the clubs that we don't think we would like first.
But why try
And
them? Like, are you
yeah,
required?
exactly.
And like,
It's
so
like,
that's the question. If the statement is like, if you're required by the school to visit every club, okay, then that makes
yeah.
sense. But if that's true, they visited 2 clubs and then skipped off as soon as Fiyune said, "Hey, want to do a thing?"
I hadn't even quite thought
So
about it
like
like
the
that,
only
but
clubs they visited were the 2 clubs they least wanted to join. And then they just left the school grounds. um, so I want to circle back real quick because the other thing I thought was
okay.
interesting is, they make this statement like, okay, clubs are required, so that means there's a lot of clubs and they all have to work really hard to recruit new students. Okay,
Right.
that makes sense. But then they go to the basketball club, and what do? They throw these girls who've never played basketball into a scrimmage. They have the actual basketball team play against the 2 girls who've never played before, and they triple team Hiromi and say, try and get out of this first year. Like, is that your recruitment technique, that you triple team new people and make fun of their inability to play basketball?
I think what they're trying to highlight here is how, intimidating these other sports are because they're not nice, they're not gentle.
I guess.
But it's like, but that's not how a club would actually work.
Yeah, what team would
Like, that's not
recruit
a
you?
recruitment
Yeah,
tool.
exactly. So I loved that, like, as if they're comparing that to the notional uh, cycling club. And then yes,
I
the light swimming club. I just need to mention this quickly. Is great. I've never heard that term. I love the idea that there's a swim team and then a light swim team who's just like
right,
girls who like swimming but don't like competing. So that was
right,
pretty funny.
and
It's fine. I just have never heard of it before.
right. And one thing I want to talk about during that club, and this got me really hard, was the fact that So Hiromi is apparently not. It's like this is the light swimming club. They don't care if you swim.
Yeah.
She's still pretending like she's swimming.
Yeah, she pretends that
Like
she knows
because she's
how.
doing like she's actually walking, but she's doing like swimming strokes, and she's like, huh. And like Tomoe even mentions like, huh, that's an interesting way she's doing it. And then she looks down and she's like, oh well, that's because she's walking. Not only that, but while doing this, she trips. And even though it's like chest high water, she still almost drowns.
Yeah, I didn't totally understand. Like, was there a drop off? I don't think there was. She just somehow started drowning, even though she could touch the bottom. Because
She could touch the
eventually,
bottom, and
Higa swam over and picked her up and pulled her out, and then she like just stood there with her feet on the bottom of the pool after being rescued.
because I guess what they're trying to do is because they have to have an excuse for Higa to meet the
Oh yeah,
girls.
exactly.
And so to get together with these girls again, so that then they also have an excuse to go to the nurse's office, which apparently is where Fuyune is.
Yeah, and Fiona's
And
in the
which
nurse's office because her muscles are so sore from biking one time that
right
she
from
which okay, that's fine because like if you're not used to it, you get sore muscles. What I like
right.
what blew me away with that is that she's like, "Didn't you guys get sore muscles?" And Hiromi's like, "No, I feel great." It's like, "Hiromi, you learned to ride a bike yesterday." There's
At the very least, Fuyune understood how the pedals
I
worked.
know. Like, how is Hiromi super comfortable with bikes now? Are we not going to address the fact that she doesn't know how to ride a bike or didn't 5 days ago? Um, yeah. So that blew me away. And then they're just like Fune basically says, "Hey, I have a meeting at a place with a person. Come with me." And they're like, "Well, you make a great argument. Let's go with you."
Oh, can we talk about real quick about that incredibly weirdly dark commercial break transition where they get to the house and they look
Oh,
inside and they see this old woman laying like hunched over in a seat, like seemingly dead.
well, Hiromi assumes that she's dead, and then they're like, "Oh, JK, Fuyune's grandma just like sleeping in chairs."
Yeah,
It's like, what was the joke there?
right. Like it's like why are you pretending that this old woman is dead?
Yeah, I don't know, but no, it turns out she's not. She's just sitting in the refurbished uh, cycling club room.
Right.
I didn't phrase that well. Do you want to just describe what Fiona's so Fiona's grandmother is the principal of the school, and they
Yes.
discover some things about her background.
Well, no, I thought it was the father who was her grandfather who was the principal,
No,
and she was
no,
just
she's the principal.
she is the principal.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
okay, fair
girls'
enough.
school, Matt.
All right, my bad, my bad. Okay, so apparently that was kind of, I guess, their storeroom. I guess that's kind of like that was kind of their meeting room.
Yeah.
Was just this
Who's they?
cottage. Sorry. Fuyune's grandmother and their cycling team. Well, not really their cycling team. It was a group of girls that used to ride bikes together to kind of go out and see the world,
Right.
sort of. Because it was a very big thing back in like the 70s for Japanese cycling. Cycling across Japan was kind of a big like almost like rite of passage in Japan
Yeah.
back in the day. And what happened was but the club disbanded. Why? Because technology.
Yeah. Yeah, because, back in my day, we used to enjoy slow rides to see the sights, but then planes and trains existed, so no one liked bikes anymore.
Basically, it's like because it's like back in the day, bicycles used to be the main mode of transportation, but then with all these newfangled trains and airplanes, people don't need bicycles anymore. And it's like you mean to tell me that nobody cared about like just going out and cycling for fun, going around and seeing the sights. That's something that people still do. You
Yeah.
mean to tell me nobody kept this club going just because everybody like hates cycling now because they can get from place to place? That there's nobody in the world who wants to do kind of like be a little bit more outdoorsy. That's absolutely a thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know. It was kind of funny that all concluded with, you know, Fiyune realizes that her grandmother was in a cycling club at this high school back in the 70s. And then Fiyune says, okay, I will restart the cycling club. And,
Yeah,
and then all the girls separately say, I will join the cycling club with you.
yeah.
Without any
And then
thought.
and then the grandmother's just like, oh, okay, well then here's the key to the room. Have fun, girls.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she's the grandmother spent all this time refurbishing this abandoned club room so that she could relive the memories that she had with her friends and like have a place to herself where she could read and listen to music. But she's like, oh well, you said you wanted it, so now it's yours, and you have a club room. Now it's yours. The end.
Right, like there's no journey here.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there's no like I could almost see how this could work. Like like Hiromi meets Tomoe, and they decide, hey, you know what? We're having fun exploring Kamakura, riding around. Why don't it's like we don't like any of these other clubs that we're seeing. We're not seeing anything here we really like. Let's try forming our own club. And they think, hey, we had that one ride with like Higa the other day. Let's see if we can get her to join the club. And they have to go through a process trying to get her to join the club.
Yeah.
And then they meet up with Fuyune, and then they're like, okay, well Fuyune is kind of like the snobby rich girl, but she seems to have some interest in doing this. Let's see if we can get her to join the team. And then they have this whole story with her trying to get to join the team. And then they're like, I don't know, we have the foreign girl who's going to join the team. We already know that thanks to the opening.
Yeah.
Uh, but and then they're like, okay, now we need to get a club room, and
Yeah,
you can do
exactly.
something with the grandmother who doesn't want to give it up because it's like, I don't have any confidence that you girls are really that serious about this.
Sure, but no, it all just happened, and they handed it to him for no reason.
Yeah, basically, and it's like I don't even know where the story is gonna go from here, like, and not in a good way. There's no story here.
Right. So the last two quick things I want to bring up on this is one that Fiona's grandmother insisted that it was not a cycling club, but it's a bicycle club. Because you shouldn't limit yourself to cycling. There's lots of ways to enjoy bicycles. What?
What does that mean?
I don't know, like repairing them? What really gets me is they're like, oh, okay, you're right. We'll be the Minami Kamakura Girls Bicycle Club.
The title of the show is the cycling club.
Exactly.
Though.
Like, so is that the name of the club? Or are they going to change it later? And if so, why go through that?
I don't know.
And then I love that the one, like, so Fiona's grandma did give them one condition in order to get the key to the club room, and it was that they would agree to commit to having many unique experiences. It's like, who says no to that? It's like, nah.
That's like
I just want to have one
I don't
experience.
know if I can handle that, Grandma.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm kind of a one experience person. I don't want to have too many experiences.
And what kind of other experiences are you talking about?
Exactly. Like, I was assuming, like, you should have many experiences. For example, you should ride a race, and you should also go on a long... I don't want to use this phrase, but long ride together. And, like, you should try to ride around Hokkaido, and you should, like, do some mountain biking. And, like, if she had said that, like, you should try different kinds of cycling. And they'd be like, okay. Then I'd be like, fine. But, no, just to have many experiences.
It's as non-specific as possible.
Alright. So...
Alright, well, speaking of non-specific...
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to go on to Teekyu?
Yeah, so this week we watched Teekyu Season 2. This season was... it built on sort of like... If the first season was there to introduce the core cast, this one introduced some secondary characters and also had some... multi-episode arcs. So
yeah, I was shocked by that.
Yeah, such as they are. So a few of my favorites. They introduced a new character, Kondo, who is a journalist who wrote an expose on the tennis club because instead of actually playing tennis, they were just playing tennis on N64. And then they had a 3-episode training camp from hell episode in which they went to a hotel, but instead of playing tennis, they spent the whole time playing ping pong.
Right.
And Konoe and Momoe spent the entire time like going off a pun about how they thought that they were going instead of going to camp, they were going to combine. So they kept trying to combine into an ultimate form together.
And it only ended up hurting their game.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a really funny gag during that. It was a funny animation gag, which was with Nasuno about how she had the smaller side
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
of the ping pong table, and because the whole gag was supposed to be because they're making a gag about how you draw the ping pong table, about how you kind of like if you do an overhead shot, you have to kind of like make it so that it sort of goes into the distance.
Right.
But in reality, for hers, she just had a smaller side.
Yeah. The I also like that they, at one point between ping pong matches, Momoi said, like, all right, we need to take a break for commercial. And they're like, wait, what? And then she pulled out the Teekyu manga and was like, hey, just so you know, volumes 1 through 4 are on sale now. This is like an ongoing thing with Teekyu where they're very, fourth wall breaky and acknowledge that they're
Right.
just trying to sell their own merch in the show itself.
I
Um,
There was another gag during that episode as well. During this game, I got a kick out of Kanoe eating her paddle, and then when it came to she took a bite out of it, and then when it ended up costing her the match because it was too short to actually reach the ball. Now,
Yeah, yeah, and it turned out the entire ping pong table was edible for some reason.
yeah.
The
Well, I don't think it was really edible. I think
shoot,
she just started eating wood.
right. The I liked also in episode 17. So it was a 3 episode arc, and in the last episode, they were talking amongst themselves, and Moe said, some jokes are funnier the more times you repeat them. Just sort of trying to call out their own show of like, we're just gonna keep making the same jokes until they're funny. Um, a couple other episodes that stuck out to me. Episode 19 had the sports fest,
Yes.
which I don't. If you want to, you can jump in. What did you like about that one?
Well, there was just one. There was one that I think this was the hardest I actually laughed. It was such a non-joke, but I loved it. And it was they were talking about, okay, now a word from the PTA. Okay, now a word from.
Well, yeah, because Colonel Sanders, Nasuno's father, Colonel Sanders,
Of
is
course.
the head of the PTA, and he was given an opportunity to make a speech, and his speech was
Uh,
which yeah,
because he doesn't talk.
yeah, exactly.
Because there's a great gag later on when they're playing the game, playing the baseball game to reclaim their court. And the baker from a previous episode gets injured because he's there as a batter. He gets hit by the ball, and he asks, like, "Will I get compensated leave?" And then Colonel Sanders just shakes his head.
Yeah, so we could go into that. There was a 2 episode arc where the baseball team destroyed the tennis court and claimed it as their own and challenged the tennis team to a baseball
Right.
game in order to, like, winner gets to keep the tennis court. And they were like, "What? Why would you destroy our tennis court?" And they're like, "It was youthful indiscretion." Or, like, we just wanted to. Or, like, "Oh, it wasn't actually us." And they're like, "You don't even know. You can't get your story straight." But they just insist anyway. And so the one thing that, I mean, there was a lot that stuck. It was funny to see a baseball episode, but eventually, the baseball team is dominating them because they're a baseball team, so they're winning by a huge margin. And then Nasuno has Colonel Sanders call and hire a substitute baseball team, so he ends up hiring a bunch of professional baseball players. But the two that they show off are actual professional baseball players. What's funny about it is that they're not like the most famous, So if if I were making a show, in Japan, and you were to hire a random professional baseball player, you would hire Ichiro Suzuki, who's like probably the best and most famous Japanese baseball player ever. Um,
Right.
so that would be the natural assumption. Like he's a celebrity of such stature in Japan that everyone would recognize him. No, I mean, and it's an animated show. They could animate anyone they want. No,
Right.
they don't go with that. They go with a guy named Tsuyoshi Shinjo. And I had to look him up because the show only sort of partially alludes to him, and I had to figure it out.
Right.
But
They censor out his name because they don't actually have the rights to do it.
yeah, exactly. So they show part of his name, but I was able to look it up. And so this guy, Tsuyoshi Shinjo, he played for 2 years in the United States in like 2002 and 2003. He played for 2 separate teams. He did like okay, but he wasn't able to secure a long-term job. And then he came back and played in Japan for a while, and then he like got famous as for like being on a game show and like being sort of like a TV on-air celebrity. So like he's not the most famous or even the most well-reputed baseball player. He's just sort of like a
Right.
dude. And then the second guy was an even less famous guy. It was a guy named Ryohei Kawamoto, who's a catcher for the Yakult Swallows, who aren't even that popular of a team. Like
Right.
he's
It's
just,
about the Giants and the Tigers in Japan.
yeah, exactly. Like those are the two most popular teams. He's for like a second tier popularity team, and he's just sort of like a pretty good catcher in Japan, and that's it. So like of all the people they could have animated, they just pick like some kind of third order baseball players. So I just thought it was funny that they chose to pick totally random guys. Um, but
I mean, Colonel Sanders is rich. He's not that rich, though.
yeah, clearly.
I did kind of appreciate how at the end of that arc they're like, no, we need. It's like we're trying to get back to tennis court, so we're going to play you in a tennis match. They murder them with Apache helicopters.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, well, yeah, and that's their idea of tennis is calling Apache helicopters to
Yeah,
attack
basically.
them. So at the end of the season, we get the introduction to Tomarine, who is an alien who appears
Oh,
to
yeah.
Momoi and says she needs fuel for her ship. She fills up her ship with beer and then crashes it because beer isn't fuel, and then disappears. But I'm sure she'll come back in season 3. And then it
Of course.
ends with Yuri and Konoe getting invited to Kondo's udon shop, which is actually a bowling alley, where the gag is that instead of serving you udon, they bowl udon at you, and so it splashes you in the face. And the series ends with the Japanese government having a huge argument over whether bowling udon should be illegal or not. It's like that's the way they want to end. So I realized that we spent the most time discussing episode summaries for Teekyu of any of these, and none of the episodes make sense inherently. There's a lot of things we didn't cover. Overall, what did you think? Did you think anything worked better in this one than the first season?
I mean, I'm starting to get into it more now that I know the characters a little bit better. Now that there's something that's really infectious about this show that's kind of hard to put my finger on. I think because it's like if this show is made by its running length of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Really, it's a minute and a half because 30 seconds is spent in the opening. I counted.
Yeah.
But it's really just it's breakneck pacing because if they elongated any of these jokes any further than they did, they would not be funny.
Oh yeah, no, it's just insanity. So it's like you can't. It's hard to explain what's funny about it. It just has to be experienced, I think.
There's a series called Hari and Goo, which has kind of very similar humor, but it takes place over the course of it's kind of like a standard episode length, and that's a series like the first few episodes are hysterical, and then like as the series goes on, it kind of gets diminishing returns based off this type of humor, but it's like this is a series that doesn't really give you time to let the punchline land.
Yeah.
And I think that works in its favor because it's just so rapid fire that if there's one gag that doesn't work for you, guess what? They got another one in 5 seconds.
Yeah, I agree. So no, it was fun.
Real quick, I just want to bring up as well the second gag that got me the most was actually in the last episode of the season where the special with ordering 2 bowls of the udon was getting 2 free glasses of water. Yuri comments, "Well, that's not really a deal," and then Konoe goes and says, "Like, oh my god, the water's so good."
No, I laughed at that. That was.
And then I appreciated that 6 Settlers of Catan reference. Like, what anime references Settlers of Catan?
Yeah, who knows? It was all over the place. It's a good show. It's a good show.
I could keep going with the gags here. There were a lot, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I think that's all we got for this week. But yeah, so as always, I appreciate your time and I appreciate your input, Matt.
Oh, I'm always happy to help.
Oh, well, good. Well, if you're happy to help, I would be happy if you helped me hit those credits.
I will hopefully do so.
Our logo design is by James Ratcliffe. The theme music is Fly High by Burnout Syndromes, covered and performed by Luke Bartka. You can follow KoshienCast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and our email is kosiencast@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll be back next week with the best and worst from the world of sports anime, and until then, keep training.